right, I think we have sound this time. Not entirely certain this is working yet. Okay, let's. Are we going? Are we starting? Is this working? Okay, live. We're live. Have we got sound? Is there anybody here? Apparently nobody's viewing. Okay, audio is good. Great. Hopefully folks will find this shortly. If you could maybe put this link out on social media, that would be great. Hello, and welcome to live programming here at the More Freedom Foundation. It's incredibly frustrating when things don't work, but now things are working. I guess when Loga shows up and others, be nice if folks could put this link out on Twitter, on the Discord, what have you. But without further ado, let's get to it. Turkey is in the midst of an extraordinary financial crisis. It is something that, it's truly unprecedented in a lot of ways. If you think of periods of like this, just sort of rapid devaluation, there certainly are precedents, but very few that have come about in exactly this way. It is extraordinarily confusing and discombobulating, just sort of watching this happen to a country that just 10 years ago was something that was a place that was taken much more seriously on a whole range of measures. Before we get into it, talk about some ground rules here. I think you generally know how this works. If Loga does not yet appear to have showed up yet, but once Loga gets here, he is the moderator. You're allowed to say anything you want about me and my ideas. You're encouraged to be abusive with it if you want, but you need to be respectful of each other. You need to keep the conversation civil and not attempt to disrupt the chat. And Loga will warn you if if you're doing that and there is no appeal from the court of Loga. I apologize. I'm a little discombobulated now too. I'm trying to make this thing work better, like do cool things. Like, look, here is the U.S. dollar versus the Turkish lira. This is something that I can do with this new software that seems to only work for me intermittently. But yeah, for those who don't know, I've been sort of deeply invested in Turkey for quite some time. Meaning personally invested. I am no longer at all financially invested in Turkey's success, though I was for a little while, for half a decade there. I lived in Turkey from 2011 to 2016. And what's been very interesting is just interesting / horrifying, more interesting because I am not in fact Turkish and do not live in Turkey, is following the career of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Rarely in history do we have financial crises like this that are entirely the result of the actions of one man. That is a incredibly rare, surprising thing that is, is what's happening here. Like it is kind of shocking in that the financial crisis in it is shocking that the financial crisis in Turkey is really the result of the choices, the predilections, the fantasies of one man. You think of hyperinflation's past. Certainly you can blame, what's happened to Argentina a number of times on certain political figures, but to have it just so consistently be the result of just the warping of reality carried out by one figure is quite shocking. Interestingly, when I started investigating this, really diving in this weekend on Turkey, my assumption, for the first time in a while, my assumption was that it was going to be something that was over, essentially. That there just isn't, there just wasn't any way that Erdogan could survive this, and I still do believe that By the time the next elections roll around in 2023, 18 months from now, the chances of Erdogan actually surviving this extraordinary economic crisis are very low, but it's not zero anymore. Having investigated, having looked into it, having read through the business press, it's there is a very small chance that what Erdogan has been doing in Turkey financially might actually work. It's an extraordinarily small chance, but he has eked out successes when we didn't expect them many, many times before. Yeah, when I talk about just like the reality warping ability of Erdogan, it is just fascinating, even to a higher extent than Vladimir Putin in Russia, the extent to which he's been able to use his ability, and more in a more democratic way than Putin does. He's managed to just shift the entire system of Turkey around him. And I think that some of this ability to do this has to do with the fact that Turkey was not, in fact, a particularly healthy or well-run space before Erdogan. It was always a place with extraordinary potential power, great resources, brilliant people, etc., etc. But it was also a place that was, well, honestly, for a lot of its late 20th century history, looked like as much of a basket case as it does now. And what Erdogan was able to do up until the past couple of years was bring a degree of stability to Turkey's economy that no one really had managed to bring about prior. And which is, I think, a reason why many more people are becoming suspicious of his ability to hold things together any further, because that economic stability that he had so carefully crafted and stewarded in his first decade in power, has been slipping away, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly over the past decade, and is now slipping away very, very quickly to the extent where there is widespread suffering in Turkey. And I think that's something that's really important to emphasize here. That's what is happening with the currency crisis in Turkey is yielding big time suffering among some of Erdogan's traditional largest supporters. It is the poor in Turkey, or the lower middle class in Turkey, that is being impacted by this. Much has been said over the past 20 years accurately about the sort of the power and the impressiveness of the growing Turkish middle class. It is that growing Turkish middle class that is now being sacrificed to Erdogan remaining in power. And it is not the young, the rich, economically viable that are being hurt by this. A lot of them have just left. Like the number of friends that I have that I made in Turkish friends that I made in Turkey who are just all over Europe, or predominantly in Portugal, is quite high. This is not it's not the old elites that are being hurt by this either. I mean, to some extent, with some really obvious examples, there are certain old elites that have been hurt, but a lot of those folks recall the bad old days of the 20th century and how unreliable the Turkish currency and the Turkish economy was, and they've covered their bases. They've got stores of dollars or stores of gold or now stores of Bitcoin, I guess. And it is the class that Erdogan enriched over his time in power that is now being victimized by Erdogan's continued need to hold on to power. What has sort of shifted my view over researching this over the past 48 hours is the realization that he does have a plan. I think that my understanding of his interest rate fixation was mostly just to be dismissive. I think I saw chats like, "Oh, he doesn't believe in central banking," or or is it this old Islamic prejudice against usury? This idea that you shouldn't have any kind of interest-bearing instruments in Islamic practice. This is, I mean, this is a very established thing to the point where there is a whole region of finance that I did a little work on, a sort of Islamic finance, which is, oh God, what were the instruments called? I won't even pretend to do that. But there are established ways, very prevalent in the Gulf, of getting around Islamic strictures against finance. This is not something, I think I got this directly from an article I read this morning, but this is not something that you can do in Turkey. Islamic finance as sort of a luxury item in the petrostates is significant, and something significant enough that you have to know about if you're doing corporate law in the Middle East, and have to understand the way those things work. That was never going to be viable in Turkey. And I think, perhaps I should have been clear about this. What Erdogan is doing, in defiance of all economic theory, in defiance of all common practices among countries, is that as the currency depreciates, as the currency loses value, he is actually lowering interest rates. The typical practice, if you're worried about shoring up the value of your currency, is to jack rates up and ward against inflation. That is, of course, what a lot of folks in the United States want Biden or the Fed to do, to jack up interest rates again. However, it's important to point out that interest rates in the United States are real or nominal values, or I think somewhere around, I think real rates, they're negative. Nominal, I think it's 0.0025 or something like that percent, whereas I believe the rates in Turkey, one of the, I think over the past year, Erdogan, again, spitting in the face of all orthodoxy, has lowered Turkish interest rates, the Turkish sort of like baseline interest rate, from 18% to 14%. So it is important to point out that we are dealing with very different, Turkey has a very different set of starting points, macroeconomic realities, dependence on foreign funding than the United States does. It does not have the exorbitant privilege. So it is important, I think, to point out that what we're talking about here is not Erdogan insisting on interest rates, down in the 0 to 5% range, which would be consonant with this idea of it being in furtherance of an Islamic stricture. I mean, we are talking like 14 to 18%. So what he's been doing over the past year is he has been insisting on lowering the rate as the currency has been devaluating. It's important to point out, though, that this is not a new dynamic. This has been something that he has wanted to do the entire time he's been involved here. If you look at this, this is just the US dollar versus the Turkish lira. When I moved to Turkey in 2011, it wasn't quite, the 1.48, Turkish lira to a dollar that it was in 2006, but it was 1.56, 1.65 Turkish lira to a dollar. What's interesting to point out is that at every point along this timeline that you see in front of you, especially when you see that little spike there, I guess that's in 2018 or 2019, all of those little spikes were you saw the same sort of freak out that we're seeing right now about Turkish finances, because all of those were historically unprecedented, devaluations of the lira. I posted on my community page a video that I made 3 years ago about how unsustainable the Turkish economy was, and I was outraged and was saying that it was a sign of guaranteed crisis that we had gotten all the way up to 4 lira to the dollar. I believe it was it 2019 when we had the big, or 2020 when we had the big sort of al-Bayrak related currency, crisis, and then it was up to, oh my God, it's at 7 Turkish lira to the dollar. How could it possibly be worse? Well, on last week we had 18. We hit in intraday trading 18 Turkish lira to the dollar, which is Extraordinary. Over the past 24 hours, I said in the description to the first version of this chat that didn't have any sound working. I said in the description, the first version of this chat, that Erdogan and Turkey were all out of rabbits. They didn't. It's the old magic trick analogy. They didn't have any more rabbits that they could pull out of the hat. Well, it's Erdogan. The past 24 hours, he has pulled yet another rabbit out of the hat. To talk about what that actually means, I think I have to talk about the truth that Erdogan has a plan here. It is kind of insane, but unfortunately, it is. I mean, it's deeply insane and deeply bruising to Turkey, and is exclusively sacrificing a lot of Turkey's success and power, intentionally sacrificing a lot of that to his vanity and to his remaining in power. But it is a plan that has the possibility of working, which is just. But what it entails is just sort of mind blowing. So it's not about. It may be to some degree, but it's not about his insistence on. The Islamic stricture of having low interest rates. What it is it's a vision, and I think this has been made explicit in recent months, of turning Turkey into China, and essentially saying that if we keep the value of the Turkish lira low, of course, yeah, like the Chinese. Just a quick caveat there, like the Chinese certainly, for a period of time, were widely seen as keeping the value of their currency artificially lower. But it was like artificially lower to the tune of 20, 25% lower than maybe it should have been. Not like not like blanket devaluation, not turning the money into toilet paper the way that Erdogan seems to be doing at this point. But anyway, like the thinking, the thought process here is that if by devaluing the currency to this degree, you make Turkey such an attractive destination for worldwide money, not for people who obviously want to make money off of the Turkish lira, but for folks who are like, oh my God, like look how incredibly cheap it is to look how incredibly cheap it is to live and work in Turkey. Let's put a business there because it's just easier. I mean, my father had a joke when I was living in Turkey, and this was. Again, this was back in the era when it was, around 2011 to 2012. I mean, back when this green line looks very reasonable and slow. Even back then, my father used to joke that I kept living in Turkey because it was the only place in the world where my rent went down every month. So this has been a consistent approach of Erdogan, like of macroeconomic policy, for quite some time. It's only gotten this extreme in the past 2 or 3 years, and I do mean in the past 2 or 3 years because even keep in mind that these little spikes here that you see are also these little spikes that you see here were also extraordinary chaotic crises. So yeah, the gamble is that if you make the Turkish people suffer, if you wipe out their savings, if you it's impoverish people so desperately that they'll be desperate to work for even the meager amounts of currency that some outside manufacturer might be willing to provide, that investment will come. And the kind of extraordinary thing mentioned on like paragraph 13 of most of the articles in the business press talking about this is that it's fucking working. It is insane, but in that video from 2018, I talked a lot about the current account for Turkey. Basically, when I talk about finance, like macroeconomics, always take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But in that 2018 video, I was talking about how the current account deficit was like 5% of some relevant Turkish number. It was, the so much more money was flowing out of Turkey than was flowing in. This is, the current account deficit or surplus. It's a very standard macroeconomic number that I don't fully understand. That number has been positive throughout 2021. The Turkish economy is technically growing, But this is a really extreme version of something that you can see in the United States economy, where over the past 12 years, the owners of property, the owners of shares, the owners of capital have done extraordinarily well, while the majority of the country, or at least the bottom 60% of the country, did more and more poorly. That's what you have in the United States. In Turkey, you've got this. If you're a savvy, business person who works with importer exporters, and you've figured out how to profit off of the immiseration of your people. Like there are Turkish people who are getting really, really rich off of this. The current account surplus is so the current account for Turkey for the past year has been positive. There is economic growth in Turkey now, but it is on the backs of the crushing of the Turkish middle class. So the plan here is it's sort of referred to as like the China plan. Or rather, maybe I'm the first person to do. I doubt I'm the first person to do that, but I think it's sort of seen as that way, like the sort of the the um, the China plan or what have you, is this idea that we're going to turn Turkey into a manufacturing powerhouse. I think during a lot of, I think a critique that was made, and I think it was accurate, is that during a lot of Erdogan's time and successful time in power, the Turkish economy was kept afloat by outside investment in capital structures, in like the entire Istanbul metro system, the highway system that's mostly brand new in Turkey right now. Of course, all of that involves, no matter how those deals are structured, it involves large debt on the part of the Turkish people, the Turkish municipalities, the Turkish whoever, to pay for this infrastructure. And yeah, that money spinning keeps the economy going. And the critique was that this is not so great for the economy. So Erdogan's answer to that is like, okay, well, we're gonna make Turkish labor so cheap and so desperate that we're gonna become a manufacturing hub instead, and it's gonna be everyone's gonna be pouring money in here, not for Turkish debt for infrastructure, but to build factories and whatnot. But what's so freaking insane about this, what is so just mind-bogglingly cruel about this, is that this is something that was already done. This is something that Turkey had already benefited from in the aftermath of, I believe it's the 1996 EU-Turkey customs agreement. It was back in yeah, and that happened. The EU got shifted a whole bunch of manufacturing to Turkey. There was a lot of money pouring in. It became the beginnings of or not not the first beginning, but like the newest new beginning of a Turkish middle class that had been sort of wiped out by past financial crises, and a financial crisis 2001 as well. But like Turkey had done it. Like by 2011, when I moved to Turkey, you could talk. Turkey was a middle income country for sure, and it was possible to imagine Turkey by 2023. I think this was something that was spoken about explicitly by Erdogan and his AK Party supporters. By 2023, you could envision Turkey as a top 10 economy, Turkey as a fully developed country, Turkey as a country like Korea or Poland that has made the full jump all the way to a fully developed country. That was something you could imagine at that point. And that is something that is no longer a possibility, to say the least. But you could imagine that Turkey was going to get there. And what's so insane and so cruel about the policy that Erdogan is following with the interest rates and with the currency is that he wants to make Turkey more competitive by crushing the middle class that was developed in earlier waves. So it's basically like saying, like, for a country like Ethiopia, or not even Ethiopia anymore, but for a country in like sub-Saharan Africa, like in the Sahel, among one of the poorer countries on the planet, for them to say, I think we want to adopt the Chinese model. We're going to try and keep our currency low. We're going to, be somewhat authoritarian in how we organize our economic stuff. We're going to do stuff like that. that for Turkey to say that, sorry, for a sub-Saharan African, a poor sub-Saharan African country like a Mali or a Chad or someone to say that, I mean, there's many practicalities that are difficult there, but it makes a sort of sense. Like, and I think Ethiopia did to some degree pay lip service to this model over the past decade, and it worked out fairly well for them. Like this idea that okay, we're very poor, we're gonna manipulate our currency and manipulate our economy to make it in favor of outside manufacturers who want to come here and do things. That made sense and like could be a vaguely successful policy. But to take a middle income country, to take a country that in 2011 was richer than most of the countries in Eastern Europe, than a lot of the countries in Eastern Europe, and say no, okay, actually we're switching gears. We're taking up the China model, like the China model, which China took up when like the vast majority of the country were dirt farmers. Like so, it's kind of mind-boggling to see a middle income country intentionally opting for extraordinary middle class wealth destruction in pursuit of setting up a sort of Chinese growth model. And it's just it's insane. It's like China deciding that the answer to its slowdown in growth is to destroy all of the wealth that it has built over the past 20 years. That, I think, is what's happening in Turkey right now. And some indicators, like the current account, like GDP growth, do indicate that this gamble that Erdogan is making is working out for a select few people at the top of the economy. I assume most likely Erdogan, his supporters, and privileged businessmen within that system. But to just choose to crush the country like this is absolutely mind-boggling. Yeah, I mean, put bluntly, most economists don't believe that this will work. Of course, most economists didn't believe that this would help him fix the current account problem. But most economists believe that there's almost no way for this Machiavellian plan to start showing results significant enough to help the Turkish middle classes that he is currently crushing by mid 2023, when we have the presidential elections and the parliamentary elections that are sort of a requirement by 2023. So yeah, I think that's a very long way of saying, I think what's incredible about this is the degree to which Erdogan has painted himself in a corner. The initial title of this presentation is "Turkey is running out of options," and there's so many things, so many absolute pipe dreams that just aren't going to come true. There's this idea that Turkey's gonna, I think, what did they actually discover did they actually discover some oil and gas in the Black Sea? I think they might have, but discovering and actually producing are very different. Eastern Mediterranean oil and gas, as fraught as that is, I don't think anybody's going to be making as much money off of any of this stuff as they expected. There's been a lot of hoo-ha about, the UAE and Turkey sort of getting, sort of burying the hatchet, getting, sort of trying to move beyond their antagonism over the past decade. And yeah, the United Arab Emirates, decided to pony up $10 billion for an investment fund in Turkey. Probably to do exactly the sorts of profiteering actions I was discussing. Basically, getting rich off of the absolute crushing of the Turkish middle class. Yay. The International Monetary Fund is not going to save Turkey. because Erdogan, I think, is too proud to take that money. One of the big things he's very proud of was sort of the completion of IMF programs and no longer being responsible to the IMF anymore. The idea that he would be able to take another IMF package at this point, I don't think he's would want to do that or be politically viable after having done that. But the IMF certainly has no interest in that because a certain degree of fiscal stability. It's really interesting. I feel like this comes up a lot with Turkey, where it's and Erdogan specifically. It's like where the actions that he is taking are so extreme that they just sort of like as I look at economics, do I think like a little more skepticism about the orthodoxy, like about the idea that central banks have to be the be all and end all, and you have to do this with interest rates? Yeah, like I think a little more scrutiny and a little more questioning of that orthodoxy would be a phenomenal thing. I think it would be a great thing. I think it's something we should be looked to and work, be proud of. But frickin' Erdogan, like, it's not like there's a difference between like, let's, maybe, it's not. It's a question of like, oh, like maybe a little bit of currency devaluation might be cool, but not going from like 1.5 to the dollar to 4.15 to the dollar. I'm not sure if I'm really like making that clear. It's just like what is going on in Turkey right now is so extreme, and the level of experimentation. The orthodoxy should be challenged, but that doesn't mean it should be completely abandoned to the extent that Erdogan is abandoning economic orthodoxy in Turkey right now. It's just so mind blowing. So yeah, like, but other things. So what happens with this, and what happened yesterday that was the rabbit that Erdogan yanked out of the hat was, if you look at this, I don't know if it comes up on this graph. I guess it doesn't. But if you see all the way at the end of the graph, you've got that spike up to 18 lira to the dollar. That was the intraday high a couple days back. And then yesterday, you had an extraordinary collapse, or rather, extraordinary surge in the value of the lira, going from 18 lira to a dollar to 12 lira to the dollar. I mean, all of a sudden, it was almost like a whole year's work. No, actually, not a whole year's. just the month. It was like he wiped away the spike of this month, and the reason was he basically introduced what is being described by Bloomberg as like a stealth interest rate hike. It's again just insane innovation that seems very unlikely he's going to get away with. What he's essentially said is that if he's sort of practically invented a new asset class here, basically saying that if the Turkish public is willing to transfer some of its dollars in return for Turkish lira in a particular account that is maintained for a particular period of time, then the Turkish government will guarantee the value of those accounts against the dollar, meaning that if the currency continues to plummet from its current value, then the Turkish government agrees to pay all the excess liras at the end of a year, which is just like it's basically the Treasury Department doing like options trading. I don't know, like maybe that, I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's just kind of hard to wrap one's brain around. So if the Turkish currency continues to, goes from 12, I think it's about 13 lira to a dollar. If a year from now it's at 11 or 12 lira for the dollar, then the Turkish government's not on the hook for anything. But if it goes from 13 to 15 or 16 or 17, where it was last week, then the Turkish government is on the hook to pay anybody who has invested in these investments a shit ton of money that it would probably have to do by taking on government debt, and it's all. Am I still streaming? Reconnection successful. That's horrifying. I just noticed there was a bit of a jump here. Are we back? If you could just let me know in the comments if we're back. It seemed like there was some disruption in the studio. But yeah, I think we're back. Let me know in the comments if we are back. So yeah, it's just kind of crazy how this is going. So the pulling the rabbit out of the hat that Erdogan pulled off yesterday seems to be holding throughout a full business day of trading. Markets are definitely closed in Turkey right now, right? Where are we with the USD TRI? We're at 13. It seems kind of stable. Has not really changed. I mean, we've vacillated over the day of trading. We've gone between, spiked to 13, down to 11 at one point. It seems to have been stabilized. This incredible ramp up does seem to have been somewhat stabilized. He seems to have pulled it off, but there's still plenty of time for absolutely anything else to go wrong. The Omicron surge in Turkey, there's just so much that is quite likely to go wrong, almost guaranteed to go wrong. I think still the by and large the safe bet is that Erdogan will lose the elections in 2023. But what I think is worth thinking about, and this was a point I wanted to make that I'm not entirely certain about anymore, considering what we know about the fact that the current account is working and the economy is growing, is that this is a central point I made about Turkey a year or two back, which is there is a plot against Turkey. There is a plot against Erdogan, largely because he fucking deserves it, because he is a loudmouth, because he is a just insulting guy on the stage. Turkey is a very real economy with very real interests that has, in large part, been abused by the United States and has very good cases and stories to make about that. But he acts like some kind of like budget Saddam Hussein. He acts like Maduro or something. The way he comports himself on the international stage is like some sort of bellowing incompetent, and very poorly serves Turkey because of that. And because of that behavior, because of, ironically enough, like very carefully defending Israel's business interests in Turkey while also talking shit about Israel. Very carefully doing the U.S.'s bidding in the Get Assad project while also talking a ton of shit about the United States. He has become a boogeyman figure, become a figure of hate in Washington, D.C., among the sort of class of idiotic U.S. government hacks and hangers-on and welfare queens, like John Bolton or Joe Lieberman, or just these defense industry whores who just go around the world looking for people to fuck with to justify higher defense budgets. And Erdogan has become a target of those people. And I made a video, I guess last year, the year before, pointing out that, well, actually, they can't really touch Erdogan or Turkey because Turkey's too big of a deal economically. The defense industry is a extraordinarily powerful industry in the United States, but it's only allowed to destroy places that don't matter economically. Or like Iraq, which mattered economically, but had oil resources that other parts of the U.S. business community were interested to get to. Or like Syria, which is just like economically almost a non-entity on the world stage. Turkey is a huge market. Turkey is a place with historical wealth and, newly generated wealth. It is a place where U.S. businesses that actually do business, not just like defense industry whores and leeches, parasites on the U.S. budget that the defense industry is. Like business people that do actual business were interested in Turkey. My concern is that with this sort of wholesale destruction that Erdogan is wreaking on the Turkish consumer market, does Turkey become lose enough value that the Saddam Hussein, that like John Bolton can successfully sell Erdogan in Turkey as a Saddam Hussein type? Like, are we getting there? I don't know. Like maybe, enough people want to manufacture in Turkey now or find it valuable enough as a tourist destination that won't happen. But I do believe that the Erdogan's destruction of the Turkish consumer market has made Turkey less valuable to U.S. capitalists who aren't just like it's risked putting the moving Turkey from the column of country that's more valuable to us alive to the column of a country that's more valuable to us as a pincushion, as a missile cushion, as a place that we can bomb. See, that's the thing. Like it's more valuable. Like Germany is more valuable to the United States as a market than as a missile pincushion. Syria, Yemen, Libya. These are places that are not more. These places are more valuable to the United States capitalist system as missile pincushions. Turkey was very much in the category of too economically valuable to start bombing. But the destruction, Erdogan's destruction of the market there, I don't know. Yeah, so okay, I think I've talked about this for about an hour. I think I've said some fairly worthwhile things about Turkey. I think from this point on, we will do questions and answers with 131 concurrent viewers. My gosh. Does anybody have any questions about Turkey, about anything else? I mean, there's plenty of other stuff I can riff off of. Obviously, as you all know, if there is a super chat, I am much more likely to answer that question, but I will answer any questions that come over the transom. I don't know. I'm always influenced by the last person I have a conversation with, but man, I'm becoming more and more concerned that we might actually have that Russia might actually invade Ukraine. I think that seems like something we could talk about. That seems like something that is a kind of a real possibility. Local Extreme says, "Can you please be careful of hitting the table? We can hear it." Well, I'm sorry about that. I will try to do less of that. Let's see. EMS says, Assad, how does he benefit from this? Well, I think Turkey and Assad, I think it's something that he sort of a very interesting question is the extent to which Erdogan or his successors will be willing to finally make peace with Assad. And it's a really key, I think for a long time, Turkey, when the economy was in better shape, Turkey was more concerned with, the prestige of being present in Syria and, Ottoman dreams or whatever, or the importance of crushing Kurdish militias in Syria. I think we're getting to a point where of vastly more importance is most probably the Syrian refugee question within Turkey, because Erdogan has made this choice, this conscious choice, to just crush the Turkish economy in the interest of enticing more foreign money. He has brought real poverty and real resentment, as we unfortunately know in country after country. When the economy tanks, when folks lose their ability to what's the word I'm looking for? Um, when the economy tanks, um, when uh, when the economy tanks, people are very likely to blame the other. They're very likely to blame immigrants. They're very likely to blame refugees. So while Turkey 10 years ago really prided itself on its ability to take care of the Syrian refugees, now the resentment of Syrian refugees in Turkey is just growing and growing and becoming a more and more omnipresent political factor. So Erdogan, I think, probably, or the Turkish government, in order to do a mass repatriation of Syrian refugees, which is definitely something they're interested in doing, they would have to um, make some kind of deal with Assad. And I think as Turkey's economy becomes more and more beat up, that kind of making that kind of accommodation might seem more and more necessary. Hmm. Joe Mike asks, what is happening with Algeria and Tunisia? Well, that's a very interesting question. I'm very worried about Algeria, frankly. I can't remember who. I think we were discussing this. We were discussing this, I believe, on the Discord chat that you can sign up for by signing up on Patreon. You get access to the Discord server. I think we were discussing on the Discord server the fact that Algeria and what's the word that I'm looking for? The fact that Algeria, I think, is getting into a very potentially dangerous situation. Because, in part, because Trump finally acknowledged what I believe to essentially be facts on the ground for 40 years now, that allowed Morocco to annex, or officially acknowledged Morocco's already existing annexation of the majority of the territory of Western Sahara. Traditionally, the Algerians were the defenders or the champions of the Sahrawi people in Western Sahara. So the Algerians are really pissed off about this. And there's like a million other things because Algeria is in desperate economic trouble because it's very reliant on sales of oil and gas. And yet it's been a great 3 to 6 months. It's been a great 3 months for people who want to sell oil and gas to Europe. The past 7 years have been garbage. Really, since 2014, there have just been a few meager price spikes. So Algeria is stumbling, trying to figure out how to deal with its own protest movement. And as always, this is something we have to worry about with Turkey as well. Would Turkey at some point, as another rabbit to draw out of the hat, would Erdogan opt to uh, take some kind of military action, probably related to Cyprus? But so the Algerian junta, the generals in charge, are running out of money, and are feeling desperately insulted by the Moroccans. Also, the Moroccans have opted for the Abraham Accords with Israel, which Algeria could never do. Just absolutely could never do. Algeria is sort of more responsive to the whole legitimation of the whole idea of the legitimacy of the Algerian state is related to anti-imperialism, and also, yes, specific anti-Israel animus. I fear that with the rest of North Africa, and this is a fear for Tunisia as well, with the rest of North Africa sort of falling into like, okay, sure, we're friends with Israel, I guess, bribed by the United States. I think that Algeria has the potential of setting itself up as the obvious bad guy here in the views of Washington D.C. So if like John Bolton and sorry, I didn't mention that one of the main reasons that I'm terrified about John Bolton, Joe Lieberman, whatnot, um, attempting to turn Turkey into like a Saddam Hussein style bad guy is that they have actually founded an organization to do that. John Bolton, Joe Lieberman, a bunch of other Iran sanctions profiteers have gotten together and formed a new organization, something about advancing democracy in Turkey or something like that. There's no Turkish people involved in the organization. It's basically just an outfit to lobby for sanctions against Turkey, figure out ways to profit from sanctions on Turkey, and argue for war if we ever get to that point. We're not to that point yet, but so there's an active lobby in Washington D.C. People love to talk about the Israel lobby or whatever, and it exists, sure, but the vastly more important is the war lobby, which is just people who want to spend a lot of money on destroying places so they can sell bombs. That's one of the most secure businesses for U.S. Congress people to profit from, for Washington, D.C. outfits to profit from, is bombing people, just selling and manufacturing the bombs. It is a straightforwardly protectionist industry in a way that very few industries are allowed to be. Everybody in politics loves bombing people. So, especially with the end of the war in Afghanistan, the U.S. government is looking for new enemies. And I fear that Algeria could all of a sudden find itself being the new bad guy without even really intending to get there, just by, I don't know, some kind of military flare-up with Morocco, some John Bolton or other bloodthirsty figure in the United States, decides to twist it in the right way, and then all of a sudden we're talking about how it's really important that we not placate we not appease the Algerian junta, or the monsters in Algeria or whatever, and that's fucking irritating. Local Cool Extreme says, remember when the libs invited Bolton to the hashtag resistance? Fucking clowns. Which makes sense. The Attack Titan asks, will Trump win the next election? There's a lot of time between now and 2024. There's a lot of things. What I'm much more interested in is what will happen in the midterms. In 2022, November 2022, the whole U.S. legislature turns over. Presidential terms in the United States are 4 years, but the legislature only has 2-year terms. The House of Representatives has 2-year terms. The U.S. Senate has 6-year terms, but it's pretty evenly divided. Every 2 years, a third of the Senate turns over. We're going to have a whole new government after the 2022 elections. It is tremendously important for the chances of Joe Biden accomplishing anything in the second half of his term that he retain the majority in 2022. And I think most people believe that there's very little chance of that. I think it's tremendously COVID related. If we get to next summer and we are all done with COVID, I think we're all done with COVID and the economy looks pretty good, and this weird dispersal of rich Democratic leaning voters all over the country has more of an impact than folks are expecting. If all of those things happen, then maybe the Democrats will be able to hold on to their majority. But I don't know. I think a lot of people are really fucking sick of Donald Trump. I think that as badly as Biden is being portrayed by some as handling the coronavirus, I think most people see that Donald Trump did worse. I think one of the key factors in the 2022 midterm elections is how Donald Trump is handled. The Democrats are absolutely, I think it's politically the right choice for them to try to make it about Donald Trump again. The Republicans, as they, will find success to the extent that they can make it not about Donald Trump, which is, I think something we saw recently in a Virginia governor's election. The Democrat wanted to scream Donald Trump the whole time, but the Republican didn't let Trump come and campaign for him, didn't talk about Trump, just, Trump who? And at that point, the Democrats just looked kind of desperate. In the midterm elections, however, Donald Trump, who knows? Maybe Donald Trump will just, not mention it. Maybe Donald Trump will do what he did with those Georgia Senate elections and basically say Republicans shouldn't vote if they're not voting for me, or Lynn Cheney or whatever, the Meyer guy from Michigan, Republicans who haven't towed the Trump line shouldn't be voted for. And then if that's the case, then he will make the 2022 election about Donald Trump and make the Democrats more likely to win. But I don't know. As far as 2024, it's just way too early to tell. Who knows who the Democrats are going to put up? If the Democrats try to put up Pete Buttigieg or Kamala Harris, yes, any Republican would beat the shit out of them. But there's so many ifs, we just don't know. Like there are other Democratic politicians out there in the country. There are other charismatic celebrities who enjoy the Democratic Party and might want to put themselves in front of him. I mean, if Donald Trump could run for president and be elected, why not The Rock? You know, like there are a million. We just don't know how much weirder things are going to get before 2024. We don't know if Trump is still going to be alive. A lot of people still think Biden's going to try to run in 2024, but man, if you've just seen a picture of him this year, that seems unlikely. Don't know. Questions. Do we have any questions? Man, no super chats, huh? Did I miss a super chat? No, I did not. I guess there's just no super chats, which is cool. What are your thoughts on President Joe Manchin? I think Joe Manchin is a weird guy. I think I'm not on board with the demonization of Joe Manchin. This is a West Virginia Democratic senator who has basically famously been a thorn in the side of Biden's agenda. To be a Democrat, West Virginia is one of the reddest states in the country. It's an economic burned over zone, tremendously reliant on coal, which is something that we are producing less and less of in the United States. They really, really hate the Democrats. So it's actually kind of miraculous that we have Joe Manchin as a senator from West Virginia. And to be a Democratic senator from West Virginia, you basically have to mostly be a Republican. So Joe Manchin has become sort of a hate figure because he's blocked some aspects of the Biden agenda, mostly because he has to show himself to be opposed to the Democrats' agenda if he's going to win another election. So yeah, President Joe Manchin, I find that pretty unlikely. That's I mean, it's kind of a funny idea, actually. Yeah, I would be surprised because the problem with Joe Manchin as a national political figure is that he is so, I believe he's actually, don't quote me on this, but I think he's independently wealthy because his family owns fossil fuel interests of some sort. And one of the things that he's been most obstructive on to the Biden agenda is any attempts to do anything about climate change. So he is very much anti. What's the word I'm looking for here? He is very much a pro. What am I talking about? He is very much a pro fossil fuel guy, and is interested in obstructing any progress towards climate change. And I think the way that progress towards ending climate change, he's a pro climate change guy, basically. And I think that I think the trend of climate politics is very much pro, it's more and more anti-fossil fuels. So I think that makes the idea of a national political run for Joe Manchin less and less likely. If that makes any sense. The Attack Titan asks, why is Kamala Harris so bad? She's just not very good at politics. She just hasn't distinguished herself. There's many reasons that she's been sort of victimized. Is there racism? Is there sexism? Yes, of course. Has the Biden administration kind of screwed her? Yes, of course. Foisting the border on her was quite a messed up thing. The Biden administration basically said, "Hey, Kamala Harris, why don't you handle this border issue?" Which, of course, didn't provide a lot of positive political opportunities. It's a sort of cancerous issue. Toxic issue. But, also, like, if you're a politician, like, you're supposed to be able to make lemons, make lemonade out of lemons, and she's sort of failed to do that. I think there's just been a ton of reporting on, she doesn't run good teams. They're not, particularly good at putting messages across. I think that if you are a female politician, you need to do, you're judged by a higher standard, which is really fucked up. But she is failing to leap that bar. And I think she's got a lot of passionate adherents, but vastly more people who don't think she has what it takes within the Democratic Party, and certainly within the country at large. So, yeah, I just don't. I have not taken Kamala Harris seriously. Hey Rob, can we get an update on the Myanmar situation? Man, yeah, I would have to. I'm sorry, I would have to research that. My understanding is, where I left it last is just that there was a coup. The Western-supported democratic government was kicked out by the. It's interesting how the Myanmar situation is kind of similar to the Sudanese situation, but I think it was more formalized and there were elections involved. The military very much kept a hand in after allowing those elections that put Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel Prize winner, in power. And in Sudan, there's also, though there haven't been any elections yet, there's this weird, unwieldy collaboration between the military and civilian elements. And I think, as we've seen over the past year, both of these situations have fallen apart quite dramatically. Um, Myanmar is a really, actually, again, similarities with Sudan, um, because we've actually seen spikes in recent weeks and months in communal violence within Sudan between different groups. Apparently, Darfur is sort of sparking up again. And the one of the crazy things about Myanmar is that there is a sort of constant low level, almost stable civil war going on against multiple dissenting ethnic militias. This was the case um, throughout the civilian government's time in power and throughout the time before. I think people were worried about the possibility, or some hopeful, but some worried about the possibility of the democratic government banding together with these ethnic militias to create a more united front against the Myanmar military dictatorship. I haven't seen much indication that that's happening. But yeah, I kind of think in both Sudan and Myanmar is that the generals are kind of get away with it, and we're all just going to shrug and move on. It's a pity. Um, but yeah, I have not done a big. The Discord link is for patrons only. I'm afraid that is sort of how that goes. You have to be a patron to join Discord. Yes. Is the U.S. encircling Turkey with new military bases around it? Or are they just for Russian aggression? They're just for Russian aggression. I don't think that. Um, I don't think Turkey is quite yet to the point where it needs to look at Iraqi and Syrian bases from the U.S. As a as a threat quite yet. I mean, they're still formally in a still formally in the NATO alliance with the United States. Like there are U.S. troops still in NATO bases in Turkey. Like Fadel points out Libya was already too economically valuable to the United States. American firms were getting contracts worth tens of billions of U.S. dollars. Tens of billions of U.S. dollars, I mean, there were already. Well, I mean, the counterpoint to that, Fadel, is that the U.S. destroyed Libya anyway. So apparently, Libya was not too economically valuable to the U.S. Was not economically valuable to the U.S. to the extent that there were people who would stop them from destroying the place. If we wanted, I mean, Turkey has already presented sort of Benghazi style opportunities for intervention for the U.S. if they wanted it. I mean, I went to Diyarbakir, God, probably, actually, yes, geez, a decade ago. I went to Diyarbakir and checked out its historic downtown, and that was destroyed by the Turkish military in a battle against the Kurds. So yeah, like it's that's a Benghazi situation right there. But it's not something that came up because Turkey isn't available for that kind of destruction. Also, Libya's wealth, as with Iraq, very related to petrochemicals, and I think there are a lot of contingents of the United States who believe that if they uh, um, that an oil industry is something that can profitably be taken control of by U.S. business interests through military intervention. I don't know the extent to which that has been proven or disproven by the Iraq experience, but I think it's different. Libya's economic proposition was mostly petroleum products, which are something that certainly, and fucking Donald Trump, still thinks you can take the oil. Um, whereas Turkey doesn't have, Turkey's value has to do with its market, which is something that has to be, peacefully maintained. It evaporates if you invade and destroy Turkey. The Attack Titan says, "Don't you think that Aung San Suu Kyi dug her own grave by allying with the military in their genocide instead of using the opportunity to push them out?" Absolutely not. I think that that interpretation, and I think that oh man, there's this phenomenal riff. It's actually very homophobic, so I guess it's not so phenomenal. But this like really, really like vitriolic, angry, profanity-filled riff from the Filipino foreign minister talking about how we basically screwed Aung San Suu Kyi with our like absolute bullshit over the genocide stuff. Um, I think people really overestimated the extent to which Aung San Suu Kyi had power over the military. Like it was very much very similar to the situation in Sudan, where the military was in charge. So I think she made the correct calculus that if she attempted to blame the genocide on the military or use the genocide as a weapon against the military, that she would have been kicked out of power in what was it 2016? I'm trying to think when the relevant time period was. So instead, she basically, in an attempt to provide a united front and allow the Myanmar democratic experiment to move forward in different ways, she essentially defended the military from accusations of genocide. And I think our abandonment of a democratic experiment on that principle, on that supposedly higher principle, was a pretty big mistake. Though the amusing but homophobic rant from the Filipino Prime Minister is, I think, kind of on point, honestly, and we shouldn't have let that happen. Jan Lauper says, "No question, just wish a happy holiday time to all and success for the MFF in the coming year." Well, thank you, Jan. I appreciate that. That's very generous. Fadl says, "Yeah, at the time, petrol products made up half of the Libyan economy. So that's, yeah, it's a huge factor." So when do you think the United States will pull out of Syria and maybe Iraq? I don't know, man. As it seems like, I mean, Syria, I think we have to pull out. Like, um, there's no legitimacy there. I mean, it's amazing. Like, there was somebody who was getting dragged on Twitter recently because he was like, "Why is the Syrian government insist on attacking U.S. troops in Syria?" And it's just like because we don't fucking belong there. It's Syria. Like the Syrian military is right to want the hostile government troops out of Syria. So I would think like that strikes me as a little less stable, but like in Iraq, unfortunately, I kind of feel I'm beginning to get the sense that we're just going to be there forever. You know, you're all familiar with the fake withdrawal that we did last. The fake withdrawal that we had last. Was it last week? When was that? The fake, hmm, the fake, the fake withdrawal we had from Iraq, was just last month. We basically, we're going to keep our 2,500 troops there, but to provide cover for the Iraqi government, we're going to call them advisors instead of combat troops. I mean, so far it kind of seems like that's working. It seems like the Iranian aligned militias lost big in the last election, even though we're still there. I'm beginning to think, yeah, it's entirely possible that we'll be guaranteeing garrisoning Iraq for like forever. But hey, I thought we'd be in Afghanistan forever, and I was wrong about that. So there's that. Oh, I got a question on TikTok. My gosh. Isn't Algeria one of America's top allies? America looks past all the massacres in the 90s. I think that Algeria has been very good at just sort of staying under the radar. I don't think that, honestly, I don't think most Americans have any idea where Algeria is. And what I believe it was primarily Bouteflika, the guy who just gotten turfed out, did a very good job in 2019, did a very good job of instantly saying, flying to DC, saying in the aftermath of 9/11, saying, here is my entire intelligence system, here is my authoritarian security services, how can we work together? Let's go after these jihadists, which did exist in Algeria, because of course throughout the 90s, Algeria fought a massive civil war against jihadists. So I think that Algeria was positioned itself very well and very intelligently after 2001, which has sort of allowed it to maintain a kind of explicitly, just a sort of national identity that is all like sort of like a throwback to the Cold War in the extent to which it's sort of anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist to a degree, of course. So I think that Algeria is kind of defended by a very good decision that the government made. In the aftermath of 9/11 and the fact that just nobody's aware of them. But Algeria becomes, the lone Arab holdout, and Tunisia seems to be holding out as well, avoiding getting into some kind of peace agreement with Israel. I mean, Saudi Arabia won't sign the accords or won't, do the deal, but obviously they're quite de facto allied with Israel and have been for quite some time. But yeah, I think Algeria has been defended by the fact that the U.S. just doesn't know any, like the U.S. public, most people in Washington, D.C. just don't know what an Algeria is. And I think that there's a risk that it'll become defined by its, it'll become defined by its opposition to Israel in ways that will be very detrimental to the Algerians. Fidelity Tofua on TikTok says America backing India to push back against China is only creating another superpower to worry about. I would strongly disagree with that. Unfortunately, I would love to create another superpower to worry about, but the data doesn't back you up on that. India turns out, might have actually been falsifying some of its GDP numbers to claim that it was reaching a sort of level of economic what have you that it hadn't even reached. Like it's a not very impressive level of economic development officially that might have already been fraudulent. And I think that India does, in fact, while it's certainly fraught, does have and is currently under stress, has a democratic system. So yeah, I don't, and honestly, it's not clear to me that the U.S. really is doing that much, other than sort of generic free trade stuff, and of course giving them a pass on nuclear weapons during the Bush administration. So yeah, I'm not too worried about U.S. support of India. I think it's generally kind of a good thing. Averrose dude, thank you for the super chat. Do we have? Is there anything? Do you have a question, Averrose dude? I appreciate the holiday generosity. Ardabashar asks, how the hell is Turkey going to have? This is a great question. Yeah, Jan Dupont. Do you think Turks have any reason to be hopeful even if Erdogan loses in the next elections? Yes, I think they have every reason to be hopeful. Every reason to be hopeful. And I should have emphasized this. Like, Turkey still has a democratic system. I did a short this morning when I sort of generically included Erdogan among dictators. Like, no, Erdogan has won elections. Like, Erdogan, there is definitely some, I think, like, there's probably some chicanery and some fraud in Turkish elections, but, like, it's on a level that's most closer to the amount of fraud in, like, US elections or Eastern European elections than it is to, like, other Middle Eastern elections. Like, it is a functioning democracy. Turkey is a functioning democracy, and most importantly, and this wasn't true, I think, for a long time. There are real alternatives. There are real opportunities. There are real opposition parties where there really weren't for sort of the first decade and a half of Erdogan's time in power. They were all kind of jokes. There are real political figures, Meral Akşener, the İmamoğlu. I mean, even I think the Financial Times was saying that I can never pronounce his name, but the GHP head Kılıç Daroğlu, was actually distinguishing himself after being sort of a famous disappointment for quite some time. So there are political options, and it's just Erdogan is such a divisive figure that even though Turkish foreign policy is not going to change anywhere near as much as post Erdogan as maybe some people in the U.S. are hoping, but you're just gonna have somebody who isn't hated. Like, he isn't like the extent to which Washington D.C. like just isn't interested in hearing anything from Turkey ever again. Like, they're done. They're over Turkey. They're just like, screw you. As long as Erdogan is in power, they're not, the United States does not react to threats. Like, we don't react to bluster positively. We react to threats by bombing them off the face of the planet. That's how we react to threats. That's how we react to, we're disrespectful and offensive to everybody, and that's very sad, and it's something that I wish we would do less of. But whenever anybody is disrespectful or offensive to us, like, we love to talk about how Turkey or Middle Easterners are so proud and have such fragile egos, whereas the United States, man, we're still murdering Iranians today because 40 years ago they took some people hostage for 20 months. We have the most fragile egos on the planet, which is why Erdogan is done. He's over for us. He has spoken disrespectfully of us too many times, and while we're not gonna shout at him or anything like that, he's just done. Like, we don't have any interest in hearing from Erdogan anymore. I've run videos saying that Turkey is 100% right to be angry and disappointed by what we have done what we've done to them in Syria. The fact that we have set up a Kurdish militia that is affiliated with the PKK, a terrorist group dedicated to dividing Turkey, to splitting up the territory of Turkey. The fact that we have decided to be involved with them and set them up as a de facto government of northern Syria is outrageous. Now, if a Meral Akşener or an İmamoğlu or someone else were making that case in a rational way, not an insulting way, not in a sort of, Ottoman slap, Captain Ottoman slap Erdogan way, if someone were making that argument from the Turkish perspective, at this point we're so dug in with the Kurds that, maybe it wouldn't be effective, but it would at least be something we'd be willing to hear. And I can't make any guarantees, but I would hope that the United States would be much more interested in hearing Turkey's side of the story and maybe even doing a little more give and take if Erdogan was gone. there's going to be no interest in hearing anything from Turkey. Um, I mean, if Russia invades Ukraine next month, then the calculation, or this week, Christmas would be a great time to do it. Russian Christmas is a different period of time. Then of course the calculations change entirely because Turkey's it's the second biggest military in NATO. But yeah, nobody currently has any interest in hearing anything from Erdogan. And I think that putting someone else in power in Turkey would make a huge difference, just because that's like how it's going to be weak Turkish government that follows. It's going to be some kind of what the hell? So it says I've got super chats here, but I don't. I think I had two super chats and I can't. Okay, there we go. No, where's the other one? There's that one. Okay, there we go. Cool. How likely is it? Alan asks, how likely is it for Erdogan to lose the 2023 election after this economic crisis? Thanks for the great content. I would say like 95%. I would say, yeah, like 95% likely that that Erdogan's going to lose. I think I would be dissenting because I think most people think it's 100% likely. I think that a lot of people just don't see how he can come back from this. I've heard some people say, oh, he's already negotiating his exit. He's already, trying to get, trying to talk to the opposition about guarantees for himself and his family. I don't know. I don't know. It's frickin' Erdogan, man. Like it's just, his party came to power in November 2002. He didn't become prime minister until 2003, but it is just stunning the amount of power, the amount of times that he has emerged from a situation that everyone thought was guaranteed to be the end. Everyone thought there was no way he could possibly have survived, and he just stayed in there. So I don't know. There's a lot that can happen in 18 months. The United States has created an international situation that is very unstable. If we're into a serious like rogue Russia situation, trying to push them out of Ukraine or some other destabilization, then maybe the U.S. decides that Erdogan's worth talking to again, and a bunch of U.S. business folks pile in to make his China experiment work. Anything is possible. And he has defeated everybody's expectations so many goddamn times that, and researching it over the past 24, 48 hours, it's like, I can just see a path. So yeah, like 95% certain that Erdogan will lose the next presidential election, and his party will get not wiped out in parliament, but will certainly fall down as well. Not saying it's 100%, but it's pretty damn likely. The TL tanking. Any chance some of this is payback by bad state actors for not purchasing NATO weapons? Too conspiratorial. Yes, Erdogan is corrupt, inept, and this is a huge part. I think that's a little too. Christopher Murtaugh, thank you for the super chat. I think that's a little too conspiratorial. The idea that the Turkish lira is tanking because of payback by state actors. However, it's not sinister payback. Like, one aspect of the economic crisis in Turkey is the impact that U.S. sanctions have had on Turkey's defense industry. Turkey has a big defense industry that it's very serious about. I think they were manufacturing components for the F-35 before the S-400 controversy became an issue. Obviously, purchasing non-NATO weapons, the S-400 is a huge problem for Turkey. I'm not entirely certain that Turkish policymakers realize how that is their central problem with the United States. Erdogan's personality and record is probably their number one problem. Number two is the S-400. Erdogan wouldn't be in this much trouble if it weren't for the S-400, for sure. I don't think the extent to which NATO is a purchasing agreement. It's a It's about selling weapons. And for Turkey to disrupt that, he thought it was kind of a fun threat to make. And it probably was. It was a fun threat to make in sort of Erdogan's, weird theater. But to actually purchase those Russian weapons that make it impossible for Turkey to purchase the F-35, yeah, that was a really, really bad move. So I don't think it's like some sinister thing. I think that absolutely, like, part of the economic disaster in Turkey that has accelerated to one degree or other the depreciation of the currency. Some small part of that, for sure, is U.S. sanctions. It's not conspiratorial. It's not a hidden thing. It's absolutely part of the mess that Erdogan has put Turkey in. I hope that was helpful, Murtaugh. Another question on TikTok. I've got 3 people watching me on TikTok now. My gosh. So I'm simultaneously doing this live on TikTok. Very exciting. When will a successful Arab Spring happen? I keep being asked. A successful Arab Spring has already happened in my mind. The analogy that keeps coming up for me is 1848. It's one of the greatest revolutionary wars in European history, but as of 1852 or even 1858, every single one of those revolutions had failed. The Hungarian Revolution against the Austrians had failed. The German national revolutions against, well, I guess also the Austrians had failed. The French 1848 revolution had actually led to dictatorship by putting Louis Napoleon in charge, that he became Napoleon III. So all of these 1848 springtime of the people's things, 10 years later in 1858, looked like a colossal failure. However, with the fullness of time, in the 1860s, the Hungarian rebellion that had been so viciously crushed by the Russians in 1848, the 1860s sort of achieved full victory. German independence and national unification happened by the 1870s. So the Arab Spring, I would argue, is in part already quite successful. It's just that the true success of this will only become manifest in later decades. Tunisia will eventually, I believe, return to a functioning, economically viable, I hope, democracy. And when they do that, whether it's under Kais Saied, their current sort of auto coup, still, I think, popular president who ended the democratic experiment this past July 25th, that guy is, whether Tunisia, returns to democracy under his influence. I think he's just announced elections at the end of next year, or a decade from here, like Tunisia's decade-long democratic experiment out of the Arab Spring will be part of Tunisia's democratic legacy. Is democracy no longer possible? No, democracy is very possible in Tunisia. They did it for a decade. It's an incredibly important thing, achievement for Tunisia and the Arab world more generally. However, as it was in Europe in 1848, you had monarchs who did a successful counter-revolution everywhere in the Middle East. That's the Gulf monarchies. Talked about this in great detail on Tuesday's big produced YouTube video. You should check out. If you follow me on TikTok, you might want to follow me on YouTube too. Lots of content. Okay. The TL tanking questions. FF asks, was there another? I feel like there was another super. Yep, there was another super chat. Daxton Min, thoughts or opinions on what if alt hist? Yes. So I think I ran a poll about. I ran a poll, gosh, a month ago now, saying, okay, who would you like me to critique or argue with or do YouTube drama with? And What If Altist is a YouTube channel that I really enjoy, honestly. He's a little right. What the fuck? Reconnection. Doing more bullshit. Okay, I think I'm going to say goodbye on TikTok as well. Yeah, okay, so my back. Yeah, so it seems like we lost the connection, but we might have reconnected. Ending on TikTok because my phone was about to die. I had 196 viewers on TikTok. Yeehaw. What If Alt Hist? Yeah, and folks really wanted me to critique What If Alt Hist. The problem is he's these very long videos, and I enjoy and agree with a lot of what he says. I think it's He doesn't make big pronouncements like the guy Kraut does. He's a little more laid back. I am sure, and I have seen things that I do object to. I'm like halfway certain that he's got a Africa video or two I'm going to strongly dislike. But I need to just sit down and watch those and look for things to argue about. I think he's a very smart kid. I think he's a little too locked into. I think he did a video um, about a month or so back, like there's going to be an economic crisis worse than the Great Depression, guaranteed. I mean, I think there's definitely going to be an economic crisis worse than the Great Depression. I don't know, and I think he's sort of locked into a lot of sort of economic orthodoxy, sort of right wing libertarian stuff that I used to believe very fervently, and stopped believing rather fervently after it simply proved not to be the case for a decade. Yes, eventually I am aware that I owe all of you guys some kind of critique or argument with what if alt hist, and I want to get there. But I think he's a smart kid. You know, he seems to know what he's talking about on a lot of things, and is hard to argue with in many respects. But I will get there. I promise. Um, All right, what do we got here? Okay, questions. What are the odds that Turkey invades Ukraine to reclaim Crimea for the Ottoman Empire, not Russia? Moldova is a part of the Ottoman Empire, not the Russian Empire. I'd say the odds of that are just about zero. Yeah. So Moldova is a separate issue. The idea of the Turks invading Europe to take territory back for themselves seems really, really fantastical to me, and not going to happen while there's a NATO, not going to happen while there's a European Union that Turkey still wants to join. 50 to 100 years from now, if everything falls to shit, I mean, maybe, but it seems very unlikely to me. The possibility of Turkey invading Crimea specifically, in the context of a NATO war against Russia, I mean, shit, maybe we could see that in the next couple months. I don't think that's particularly likely either. I think if Russia does invade Ukraine, it is likely not, unless Poland takes matters into its own hands and just says fuck it and invades Belarus or something, hitting Russia's flank. And if Poland did that, would the United States feel obligated to join in? I just don't know. But the possibility of NATO as a full entity being drawn into conventional combat with Russia to the degree where Turkey would be invading Crimea, invading Crimea in what's the word, in an amphibious assault. I find that hard to credit. I find that pretty unlikely. Yeah. Ardabasha says, I think no one except for a small portion of the Kurds wants Kurdish independence. Kurds outside of Turkey might want something like that more. Yeah, I think that's sort of a similar dynamic to Ukrainians, sort of Russians in Moldova or Russians in Ukraine. Crimea certainly, want reunifications with Russia because Russians are doing better in Russia than they are in Ukraine, whereas the Baltic Russians, I don't see any real possibility of, serious infringement on on the Baltics from. I don't see any real possibility of serious infringement on the Baltics because of. Oh wow, gosh, very generous super chats. I will get there. I don't think there's any real possibility of serious impingements into the Baltic countries because Russians in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are vastly better off than Russians in Russia. And I think Kurds in Syria or Iran, and probably Iraq, are, well, there's no Kurdistan, are poorly off, and might want some kind of independence, whereas Kurds in Turkey, well, before 2015, had a lot more economic opportunity than they had anywhere else, and were less likely to want to screw things up. I mean, it's something that shifts. I think I've said before, I dated a woman who, whenever the PKK did a terrible terrorist thing, she was a proud Turk and was angry at those Kurdish terrorists. And whenever the Turkish government did something in Kurdistan, she was a proud Kurd who resented those evil Turks. So I mean, it's a very fungible thing. There's a lot of like, what have you done for me lately? So yeah, the Erdogan of like 2003 to 2015, who was very interested in peace with the Kurds and a Kurdish peace process. Yeah, like very few Kurds were interested in independence at that point. I don't think it's like gone from 5% of Kurds to 70% of Kurds who are interested in that sort of independence from Turkey now. But has it gone from 5% to 6 or 7 or 8 or 10%? Maybe. But yeah, I think you're basically right, Arda. I didn't see a lot of Kurdish support of from Kurds I knew for independence, not serious support for independence while things were going great economically in Turkey. No longer the case. Who knows? We've got some super chats. Daxton Min, hey Rob, can you elaborate on why you think China needs a new government for continued rise? How long do you think a potential transition would take? Man, that's a huge, huge, huge, huge question. I just think, and maybe this is just vestigial libertarianism or just knowledge of American history, is like there needs to be, or just growing anti-monopoly sentiment, is I just don't believe, I haven't seen in human history a situation where the more authoritarian centralized system wins out. I just don't, or rather beats the more innovative, more sort of enterprising approach. Like I just really do believe that we're going to see a collapse in innovation from China. I think we were really getting to the point where China had, I mean, TikTok is fascinating. Just a real world-beating company. But now the Chinese government is trying to crush that tech, that consumer tech business because it feels somewhat threatened by the power accumulated by those folks. I just don't see. Yeah, China's got a lot of patents, but what do those patents actually mean? Like, are those patents being converted into businesses that can do as much as they can do with those patents? I just think that we've seen over the course of modernity, we have seen that catch-up growth has, I mean, the French, I think the French of Napoleon III were really like the first big catch-up growth economy, and they did it, and then they just they hit a wall eventually under dictatorship. And I think that we're gonna see that we are seeing that, frankly, with China as well. There's a certain amount, the Soviet Union is a great example. Folks obviously don't like to point to it in the United States, but in I think the 20s, 30s, 40s, and even 50s, there was some extraordinary economic successes in Russia through sort of authoritarian planning. But then they eventually reached a limit where you just couldn't plan the kind of innovation or consumer economy that you needed. And I just don't think that, I think China's going to hit the same sorts of natural breaks. I think we're already seeing that. So I think a more, Taiwanese style government is going to be necessary. There's any number of ways that can happen. China's authoritarian government can limp on for decades, getting nastier and nastier, or it could all fall apart fairly quickly with a failed invasion of Taiwan. It's one of the reasons that I'm not so all fired for Taiwanese independence or autonomy is like I kind of think, and I think this is something that other folks have hinted at, the chances of actually the Taiwanese being able to present an alternative to the Communist Party that's quite attractive within China is not zero. So yeah, it's a huge. How long could the potential transition would take? Somewhere between 6 months and 150 years. Yeah, it's a. I don't know. Like that's getting into future thought that I'm not equal to. Oh, Scott, thank you so much. Scott, that's a very tremendous super chat. Merry Christmas to all. With the elections of Arce in Bolivia, Castro in Honduras, um, Boric in Chile, and likely Lula in Brazil, is the U.S. hard coup empire in Latin America over? I never want to say never. I never want to say it's finished. But it is fascinating. You know, this consolidation of the pink wave in Latin America is fascinating. I think it's certainly something we owe to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's insane. That's actually that's a video I should do. If you're worried about the pink wave in America, you can thank Donald Trump, because Donald Trump, after an Obama that was quite consciously moving away from the hard coup empire, from aggression, was attempting to build what's the word I'm looking for? Was attempting to build bridges in with Cuba. Wasn't that interested. Was just going to let Venezuela fail without trying to push him over. It was a really positive series of developments, and basically the United States was just saying, you go do you, and that produced, honestly, like a surprising surge of right-wing governments. As a lot of the first pink wave proved to be disappointing in a variety of ways. I'm thinking Macri in Argentina, obviously Bolsonaro, the and then Donald Trump came in and was like, no, we're going to sanction Cuba again. We're going to call them terrorists. We're going to do military maneuvers to threaten Venezuela. We're going to starve it to death. And all of a sudden, there's a brand new pink wave in Latin America. I mean, some of that's just the natural oscillation, and it's phenomenal. Don't let me undersell it. It is phenomenal to see real democracy happening in Latin America. Of the Arce, Castro, Boric, Lula, some of them are going to succeed, some of them are going to fail, and if they fail, they're going to get replaced by right-wing governments that will have real democratic legitimacy, and that's fucking phenomenal. That is what we should have allowed to happen in Latin, well, the whole time, obviously. But that was FDR. I mean, I think the most popular that the United States was in Latin America over the 20th century was in the late 30s and 40s into the 50s, when the United States just left Latin America alone and let it do its own thing. And that's where we should get back to. And it does seem like we're kind of there. I think Biden's going to do some shit against Nicaragua and talk some more shit about Venezuela, but like generally, I think hopefully at least for the next 3 years, Latin America will be able to go its own way, and that makes me happy. So yeah. Any more questions? Any more super chat? We are down to the end of the hour. Well, I guess it is a little late because we had such horse shit at the beginning. Are there any more questions? Any more super chats? I think I'm probably going to start pitching. Let's see if we have any questions. James Cook, Evan Lozano, you're right wing, really? Listen to MFF right now. Pink wave equals Trump, huh? No, man, I'm saying Trump caused the pink wave. Do you think the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean could lead to an armed conflict between Turkey and Greece? No. I was just talking about this with a friend recently. It's just like, if Turkey were to openly attack a NATO ally, then Turkey would be booted out of NATO. I think that's, yeah. And I think Turkey would absolutely, even if Greece were the aggressor, which seems very unlikely, because Greece is so much weaker and smaller. Even if Greece were the aggressor, I think Turkey is more likely to be the one that is seen as the aggressor, regardless. So yeah, I just think, and I think even Erdogan knows that. I was thinking about that actually. I was like, well, what? When I was thinking that Erdogan was more fucked, it's like, what can he do? Like, what can he? Because yeah, Erdogan does that. He takes these decisions, and the currency manipulation he did yesterday is one example. He takes these steps where the possibility, the short term gain for his power is high, but the long term potential destruction for Turkey's interests is also very high. And he takes. I mean, certainly starting a war with Greece would be a pretty extraordinary example of destruction and mistake. But don't know. Okay, I think. Oh, Dexamin asks, do you think we could get more live streams towards the new year like you did last year? Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I certainly would like to figure out how to launch a live stream without fucking it up completely and screwing up all the links. So that's definitely something worth considering. Um, Maltemeyer says, I don't support U.S. intervention either, but when Rob conflates Russian identity and Russian speaking one more time, I don't know, punch something or so. Well, I'm sorry, Malta. Didn't mean to disappoint you there. In the Discord, which folks are joining here, you said that Western farming was a massive welfare scam. Can you elaborate on that? So yeah, the Western United States is a desert. I read this book, Cadillac Desert, which is kind of fascinating. It is naturally a desert, but it was turned into agricultural paradise entirely through government intervention on the behalf of large agricultural interests that never paid any of this money back to the central government, and a series of dams that extraordinarily changed the character, the ecological character of the Western United States. Made it, certainly gave birth to great economies, but all of the benefits, most of the benefits of this, have been sort of carved off by a very small class of folks in the United States. Do you think the focus of U.S. pressure will shift from Iran to Turkey and will let Iran breathe a little? Unlikely. I think we're just going to keep on being evil to Iran for quite some time. Fadal asks, Egypt now has the third most powerful navy in the Mediterranean and an economy that's experienced real growth. I think the 2030s and 2040s, etc., will be shaped by a Turco-Egyptian rivalry. Man, I hope so. I've just become so accustomed to seeing Egypt as sort of the sick man of the Middle East. I would love it if, even if it were under the murderous dictatorship of Sisi, I would not be heartbroken to see a more powerful Egypt. I think the world needs a powerful Arab country, and Egypt has always been the most likely possibility for that. It would be nice to see. Yes, Angel, I totally was reacting to your comment there. It would be really nice to see. It would be really nice to see the Middle East not get sort of taken over by the Turks, the Israelis, and the Persians, as had been. And Egypt's growing power is the best promise of that. Yeah, okay, I think we're done with questions. Someone asked if I was looking to collaborate with any more channels. I absolutely am. That's one of the reasons why I keep screwing up this, in the name of like the ability to switch from scene to scene. I keep screwing up the live chats. The hope is that I will eventually be able to. The hope is that I will eventually be able to figure out how to use this to do more interviews, more collaborations. I mean, it's one thing for me to be like, yeah, let's do a collaboration, like just sort of volunteering to do more work with folks. But I think most people are willing to come do an interview. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that. Is Egypt army a paper tiger? I would say so, but Fadel doesn't seem to think so. So I don't know. But yes, also no spamming. All right. Let's see. Okay, I think we've been doing this for 2 hours. We're going to start spieling. Please follow me on Twitter at RoboLaw. I'm there all the time. Patreon and PayPal are the ways that you can send donations if you are interested. It is You can find the links for that on my YouTube channel. Patreon, we do a monthly patrons only newscast where I basically try to cover everything at length. It's sort of like the Q&A at the end here, except I actually prepare. So like someone asked me about Myanmar, then I put Myanmar on the list and I spend a half hour, 45 minutes actually researching what's going on in Myanmar right now. So that's the patrons only newscast. I do that once a month. That's for the patrons only. Also for patrons only, we have the Snapchat. Thanks, Mert. Thanks for the super chat. Mert says, "Happy holidays, everyone." Sorry, not Snapchat. What the hell was I talking about? I do not have an MFF Snapchat, nor am I about to. No, there's a Discord server that I've really been enjoying interacting with over the past couple months that Logos helped set up. It is the Discord server. We're gonna do at next week some point. So the Discord server for the patrons, it's just an ongoing discussion of geopolitics all day, every day. It's fun. Folks making me aware of certain issues, making other folks aware of certain issues. It's just a bunch of folks doing a deep dive on what's happening in the world. It's my favorite media source, honestly. Is the Discord live chat. Also, once a month, we just do like a Zoom chat through Discord. I don't prepare anything for it. We all just sort of hop on. I get to hear the voices, see the faces of patrons, which is fun. We just sort of discuss stuff. I'd recommend that highly. That's also if you sign up for Patreon, you can join the Discord. I have a TikTok at the More Freedom Foundation, which is surprisingly growing a lot. I think they're more interested over on TikTok in letting new channels grow. So that is the TikTok. There's a Instagram at More Freedom Foundation. I've written some books, Avoiding the British Empire, Everybody's Lying About Islam, and some other more complicated stuff. You can find those on Amazon. All right. Let's see. Yeah, that's true. If you join the Discord server, you can bully Rob in person. All right, folks. Thank you so much for showing up, for being here. You know, my system tells me I've had 1,200 people watching. As many as 94 watching at once, which is lovely. Apologies for the screwed up launch. I have learned once again, second month in a row, to launch these things better. But hopefully that won't be the case. You know, that is interesting. Maybe I will do a bonus live chat by the end of the year. I did that a lot last year, and that was fun. But we'll see. Anyway, thank you all so much. It's great to have you here, and you guys are the only reason that the More Freedom Foundation is still going. I'm very grateful to all of you. And yes, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Let's all hope that I think 2021 was a little better than 2020. Let's hope that 2022 is a lot better than 2021. Y'all are the best. I hope you have the ability to relax, kick back in the holiday season, wherever you are, and very grateful. Thanks. And cool.